May 27th, 1943. Pacific Ocean, 850 miles south of Hawaii. Lieutenant Louis Zamperini's B-24 bomber plunges into the ocean. His hands search frantically through the sinking wreckage. Emergency provisions, food, water, anything. He finds 6 chocolate bars, D-ration bars, 4 ounces each. 24 ounces of food to sustain 3 men in a life raft, drifting across 2,000 miles of shark-infested Pacific. Zamperini doesn't know these bars will be the difference between death and survival over the next 47 days. But in April 1937, 6 years before Zamperini's plane goes down, U.S. Army Captain Paul Logan sits in a conference room at Hershey, Pennsylvania, with an impossible request that military experts are calling insane. The statistics paint a dire picture. In 1936, the U.S. Army conducts field tests of emergency rations. Soldiers receive traditional hardtack biscuits, the same Civil War-era tooth dullers that crack molars and crumble into useless dust. Failure rate, 73%. The biscuits either absorb moisture and rot, or become so hard they require a hammer to break apart. Canned rations work better, but they're impossibly heavy. A soldier carrying 3 days of sea rations lugs an additional 16 pounds of metal cans that clang with every step, advertising his position to enemy soldiers. Army physicians calculate the mathematics of survival. A combat soldier requires 3,000 to 4,000 calories daily. Traditional emergency rations provide barely 1/200 calories and fail within weeks. The result: soldiers entering prolonged combat face starvation even with full ration packs. In tropical climates, the problem becomes catastrophic. During the 1936 Pacific maneuvers, 89% of stored emergency rations melt into inedible sludge at temperatures exceeding 100 degrees sour. Captain Logan lays out specifications that seem impossible. Create a bar weighing exactly 4 ounces. Pack 600 calories into that tiny package. Make it withstand temperatures up to 120 degrees without melting. Ensure it survives for months in a soldier's pack without spoiling. And here's the requirement that makes military nutritionists laugh. Make it taste just a little better than a boiled potato. Unpleasant enough that soldiers won't devour their emergency rations on a whim, but edible enough to sustain life when nothing else remains. What Captain Logan doesn't know, what none of them know, is that sitting across the table is a 37-year-old chemical engineer from Pennsylvania State University who will solve this impossible problem with a formula so radical, so contrary to every principle of confectionery science, that it will save thousands of lives while tasting absolutely terrible. The problem of military rations is as old as warfare itself. For centuries, armies marched on hardtack, flour, water, and salt baked into virtually indestructible biscuits. Roman legions called it bucellatum. British sailors survived on ship's biscuit. Union soldiers during the Civil War nicknamed it sheet iron crackers. Hardtack worked because it refused to spoil. Baked multiple times to remove every trace of moisture, a properly made hardtack biscuit could last decades. Civil War veterans in the 1890s still kept specimens from their service, tooth-breaking reminders of battlefield hunger. But hardtack had fatal flaws. It provided minimal nutrition, barely 75 calories per biscuit. Soldiers needed to consume 8 to 10 biscuits daily just to avoid starvation. Worse, hardtack absorbed moisture like a sponge. In humid climates, it transformed into moldy paste. In dry climates, it became so hard that soldiers soaked it in coffee for 30 minutes just to make it chewable. World War I brought canned rations. The reserve ration of 1907 evolved into the trench ration of 1918. Canned corned beef, beans, vegetables. Nutritionally superior to hardtack, but catastrophically heavy and bulky. A 3-day supply weighed 16 pounds and required a can opener. By the 1930s, military strategists recognized they're facing a new kind of warfare: mechanized combat, rapid deployment, airborne troops who can't carry 16 pounds of canned food. The emergence of tactical aviation demands lightweight, calorie-dense emergency rations that pilots can carry in survival kits. The experts propose solutions, all failures. The Army Quartermaster Corps tests compressed pemmican, dried meat mixed with fat, a Native American survival food. It provides excellent calories but turns rancid within weeks. Rejection rate in field trials, 94%. They try dehydrated biscuits enriched with vitamins. These crumble into powder, leaving soldiers with bags of floury dust. One soldier's field report reads, "Opened my pack to find 3 days of rations had become one handful of crumbs. Recommend immediate discontinuation." Chocolate seems promising. It's calorie-dense, providing 150 calories per ounce. It's portable. Soldiers love it, but standard chocolate melts catastrophically. During 1936, summer maneuvers at Fort Benning, Georgia, every chocolate bar in every soldier's pack liquefies into brown puddles. The Army issues a report: chocolate unsuitable for field rations in any climate exceeding 85 degrees Celsius. The scientific consensus is clear. You cannot create a chocolate bar that won't melt. It's thermodynamically impossible. Cocoa butter melts at 93-95 degrees Celsius. Human body temperature is 98.6 degrees Celsius. Any chocolate carried near a soldier's body will liquefy. Period. Military nutritionists at Walter Reed Army Medical Center conclude emergency rations must abandon chocolate entirely, focus on compressed biscuits or dehydrated preparations. But Captain Paul Logan refuses to accept this answer. Logan serves in the office of the Quartermaster General, Subsistence Research Laboratory. He's not a scientist. He's a logistics officer who's read too many casualty reports. Reports of soldiers starving despite carrying emergency rations. Reports of pilots dying because their survival kits contained melted, unusable food. Logan calculates the stakes with brutal arithmetic. The U.S. Army expects to mobilize 8 million soldiers if war comes. If even 1% enter emergency situations requiring emergency rations, 80,000 soldiers. And current rations fail 73% of the time. That's 58,400 soldiers whose lives depend on food that doesn't exist yet. In April 1937, Logan makes a decision that will be called reckless by his superiors and brilliant by historians. He bypasses military suppliers entirely. He approaches a civilian candy company in central Pennsylvania, the Hershey Chocolate Corporation, and requests a meeting with their chief chemist. The request is unusual enough that it reaches William Murray, Hershey's president, who's intrigued. Murray calls in Sam Hinkle, the company's chief chemist, for what promises to be an interesting conversation. None of them realize they're about to create something that will still be saving lives 80 years later. Samuel F. Hinkle doesn't look like a revolutionary. Born in 1900 in Columbia, Pennsylvania, Hinkle grows up in a modest family with no connection to the candy industry. His father runs a small retail shop. Young Sam shows aptitude for chemistry and mathematics, but there's no money for fancy education. Hinkle works his way through Pennsylvania State University, graduating in 1922 with a degree in industrial engineering, later renamed chemical engineering. He's 22 years old with a diploma and no job prospects in the post-World War I recession. He answers a classified advertisement: chemical engineer wanted, candy manufacturing experience not required. The Hershey Chocolate Corporation, founded by Milton Hershey in 1894, is expanding their research department. Hinkle has never made candy in his life. He's never worked with chocolate. His engineering training focused on industrial processes, steam engines, factory efficiency, mechanical systems. The idea of applying those principles to confectionery seems absurd. His interview with Milton Hershey himself lasts 15 minutes. Hershey asks one question that matters. Can you solve problems nobody else can solve? Hinkle answers honestly, I don't know until I try. Hershey hires him in 1924 as a junior chemist. For 13 years, Hinkle works in relative obscurity. He helps develop Hershey's chocolate syrup. He contributes to Mr. Goodbar and Crackle. He's competent, methodical, and completely unknown outside Hershey's laboratories. By 1937, he's chief chemist, a managerial title that means more paperwork than innovation. At age 37, Hinkle supervises other scientists rather than conducting experiments himself. His career has plateaued. He's well paid, but forgettable. Then Captain Logan walks into the conference room with his impossible specifications. William Murray, Hershey's president, sits beside Hinkle as Logan explains the requirements. 4 ounces, 600 calories, withstand 120-degree Fahrenheit temperatures, survive months of storage, taste deliberately unpleasant. Murray is skeptical, but intrigued by the potential military contract. He turns to Hinkle. Is this possible? Hinkle's response becomes legendary at Hershey. I have no idea. Every principle of chocolate manufacturing says it's impossible, but I'd like to try anyway. The moment of insight comes not during the meeting, but 3 days later. Hinkle sits in his laboratory, surrounded by failed chocolate samples. Every attempt to create heat-resistant chocolate results in either brittle, inedible bars or bars that still melt at 95-degree Celsius. He's thinking about the problem backwards, he realizes. Everyone approaches chocolate as a confection, something meant to melt on the tongue, to taste pleasant, to satisfy a sweet craving. But Logan doesn't want confection. He wants survival food. What if, Hinkle wonders, we stop trying to make chocolate that tastes good? What if we deliberately make it unpalatable, thick, bitter, dense, and in doing so, create something that satisfies Logan's specifications? It's a heretical idea in the candy industry. Hershey's entire reputation rests on making chocolate that people crave. The company slogan is, "The Great American Chocolate Bar." They market pleasure, not punishment. Hinkle's proposal inverts everything Hershey stands for. But standing in his laboratory, surrounded by melted failures, he suddenly sees the solution. Create the worst-tasting chocolate bar possible, and it might just save thousands of lives. Hinkle begins experimenting in secret after hours. He can't use the main production facilities. Those run 24 hours manufacturing commercial chocolate. Instead, he sets up in a corner laboratory, working with small batches, testing formulas that would horrify any respectable chocolatier. The first decision, increase cocoa content to 50%, double the normal concentration. This raises the melting point but makes the mixture phenomenally bitter. Second, add oat flour. Not finely ground oat powder, coarse oat flour that creates a gritty, unpleasant texture. The oat flour absorbs moisture and creates binding structure that resists heat. Third, reduce sugar to 25% of formula weight, far below the 35-40% used in commercial chocolate. Less sugar means less moisture attraction, better heat resistance, and absolutely terrible taste. Fourth, add skim milk powder for protein, but not enough to create creaminess, just enough for nutritional value. The result is a thick, viscous mixture that refuses to flow through normal chocolate equipment. It's so dense that it clogs pipes and jams molds. Production workers call it concrete. On June 1st, 1937, Hinkle produces his first test bar. He lets it cool overnight, then conducts the critical test. He places the bar on a heating plate set to 120-degree Fahrenheit for 1 hour. The bar softens slightly but doesn't melt. Hinkle breaks off a piece and tastes it. His laboratory notes record the moment. Texture similar to chalk. Taste extremely bitter with gritty mouthfeel. Marginal palatability. Successful heat resistance. Recommend proceeding to Army testing. The next morning, Hinkle presents his formula to William Murray and senior management. He brings samples, ugly brown bars that look more like industrial material than candy. The room's reaction is immediate and hostile. "That is absolutely illegal," shouts Herbert Swope, Hershey's head of commercial production. We will not put our name on chocolate that tastes like that. It's commercial suicide. One bar of that garbage will destroy decades of brand reputation." Harold Smith, marketing director, agrees. "We've built Hershey on quality and taste. Releasing this abomination contradicts everything we stand for. The Army can find another supplier." Even Murray, who authorized the project, seems shaken after tasting the sample. "Sam, I understand the specifications, but this crosses a line. We're a candy company, not a manufacturer of edible punishment." Hinkle listens quietly, then responds with a question. "How many soldiers do we want to save?" Because that's the choice. Pretty tasting chocolate that melts into useless liquid, or effective survival rations that keep men alive. The argument continues for 2 hours. Finally, Hinkle plays his final card. He retrieves a letter from Captain Logan, a thank you note mentioning that the Army is simultaneously negotiating with Nestlé and Mars for backup suppliers if Hershey declines. Murray makes the command decision. We proceed. But this product carries no Hershey branding on the wrapper. It's military specification only. We protect the commercial brand. On June 18, 1937, Hershey signs a contract to produce 90,000 experimental D-ration bars for Army field testing. The production begins, and immediately everything goes wrong. The mixing equipment can't handle Hinkle's formula. The chocolate mixture is so viscous that it won't flow through standard manufacturing lines. Pumps overheat and jam. The mixture is literally too thick to move. Hinkle revises his approach. Hand packing. Workers must manually press the viscous mixture into 4-ounce molds. It's labor-intensive, slow, and expensive. Production rate, 100 bars per hour instead of the 5,000 bars per hour typical for commercial chocolate. But the bars survive heat testing. Army quartermasters place samples in ovens at 120 degrees Celsius for extended periods. The bars soften but remain solid. They're packable, stackable, and shelf-stable. In November 1938, the Army formally designates Hinkle's creation as Emergency Ration Field Ration D. Then Congress gets involved. Representative Robert Rich of Pennsylvania, chair of the House Agriculture Committee, receives complaints from commercial bakers who've lost the military ration contract. They argue Hershey is using political connections, Milton Hershey's reputation, to monopolize military contracts. Congressional hearings in February 1939 summon both Hinkle and Captain Logan. Representative Rich interrogates Hinkle. "Mr. Hinkle, you have no formal training in nutrition science, correct?" "Correct, sir. I'm a chemical engineer." "You're not a trained baker?" "No, sir." "You've never served in the military?" "No, sir." "Yet you're producing emergency rations for our armed forces. On what basis do you claim competence?" Hinkle responds carefully. "Sir, I claim competence based on results. The D-ration bar meets every military specification. It withstands temperature extremes that destroy all competing products. It provides 600 calories in 4 ounces. It's the only emergency ration that works." Representative John Tabor of New York intervenes. "But at what cost? These bars reportedly cost 17 cents to manufacture. Commercial chocolate costs 9 cents per bar. You're gouging the military." The room erupts. Representatives demand cost breakdowns. Hershey's competitors sense opportunity. The hearing threatens to kill the entire program. Captain Logan requests permission to speak. "Gentlemen," Logan stands, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I've read casualty reports from the Spanish Civil War. I've studied survival rates among downed pilots. I've calculated what happens when soldiers carry emergency rations that fail. The mathematics are brutal. Soldiers die, not from enemy action, from starvation, from having food that melts or rots or becomes inedible." He continues, "Mr. Hinkle's bars aren't pretty. They don't taste good. Commercial bakers are correct that they could make cheaper bars. But those cheaper bars will liquefy at 95 degrees. They'll fail at precisely the moment soldiers need them most." Logan pulls out survival statistics. In 1938, the Navy conducted sea survival tests. 20 downed pilots received traditional emergency rations. After 3 days adrift, 90% of those rations were unusable, melted, contaminated, or lost. We gave another 20 pilots D-ration bars. After 3 days, 100% of the bars remained edible. That's the difference between life and death. The room falls silent. General Henry Gibbons, representing the Quartermaster Corps, adds his perspective. "Gentlemen, we're approaching war. Germany is rearming. Japan is expanding. When, not if, American forces enter combat, they'll need emergency rations that work under the worst possible conditions: desert heat, jungle humidity, Arctic cold. Only one product meets those requirements." Representative Rich calls for a vote on continuing the D-ration program. The vote is 8-5 in favor. Before we continue with what happens next, this channel depends on your support. If you're enjoying this deep dive into forgotten World War II history, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Less than 20% of viewers are subscribed, which means you're missing our other incredible war innovation stories. Subscribe now, and let's get to the most dramatic part. When these bars go to war. On October 17, 1939, the U.S. Army officially standardizes the field ration D. Hershey receives contracts to dramatically scale production. But nobody, not Hinkle, not Logan, not anyone, fully grasps what's coming. In September 1939, Germany invades Poland. World War II begins. And within months, the D-ration bar will face the ultimate test. Production scales rapidly. By 1939, Hershey produces 100,000 D-ration bars daily. By 1941, with American entry into WWII imminent, that number reaches 500,000 daily. The entire Hershey plant reorganizes around military production, but production is one thing. Combat performance is another. The first real test comes not in combat, but in the sky. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The attack launches America into war, and immediately, pilots receive D-ration bars in survival kits. If shot down over the Pacific, these bars represent their only food source until rescue, if rescue comes at all. Lieutenant Robert Scott, flying P-40 Warhawks in China, keeps 3 D-ration bars in his flight suit. On March 10, 1942, his plane is hit by Japanese anti-aircraft fire over Burma. He bails out, landing in dense jungle 60 miles behind enemy lines. For 4 days, Scott hikes toward Allied lines. The D-ration bars provide his only sustenance. In his post-war memoir, God is My Co-Pilot, Scott writes, "Those bars tasted like chocolate-flavored dirt. But that dirt kept me alive long enough to reach friendly forces. I owe my life to that terrible-tasting chocolate." The Pacific Theater becomes the D-ration's proving ground. May 27, 1943, Louis Zamperini's B-24 crashes. 3 survivors: Zamperini, pilot Russell Phillips, and tail gunner Francis McNamara. They have 2 life rafts and 6 D-ration bars, 24 ounces of food total. The survival math is cruel. 3 men, 47 days adrift, consuming approximately 1/8 of a bar per man per day. Each quarter bar provides 150 calories. far below the 2,000 plus calories needed daily, but just enough to prevent death by starvation. Zamperini later tells interviewers, "We'd break off tiny pieces, letting them melt slowly on our tongues to make them last. They tasted awful, bitter, chalky, gritty, but they were dense and filling in a way regular chocolate never is. That density, that awful texture that everyone complained about, that's what saved us." The bars survive conditions that destroy all other food, floating in salt water for 47 days, baking in equatorial sun, subject to Pacific storms. When rescue finally comes, after 2,000 miles of drift, the remaining bar fragments are still edible. Military surgeons studying survival cases note a pattern. Soldiers with D-ration bars survive an average of 21 days longer than those with standard rations. The survival rate improvement, 34%. The European theater provides different challenges. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The 101st Airborne and 82nd Airborne drop behind Normandy beaches hours before the main invasion. Each paratrooper carries K rations for 3 days and D-ration bars for emergencies. Many paratroopers land miles off target, scattered across French countryside. Small groups spend days evading German patrols while trying to reach Allied lines. D-ration bars become their survival lifeline. Private Robert Rader, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, lands in a swamp. His K-rations are destroyed by water. For 2 days, he survives on 1 D-ration bar while moving toward Utah Beach. He arrives exhausted but alive. December 16, 1944. Battle of the Bulge. German forces launch a surprise offensive, encircling the 101st Airborne at Bastogne. Supply lines are cut. Temperatures drop below zero. For 8 days, 12,000 American soldiers hold Bastogne surrounded by German forces. Regular food runs out by December 19th. Officers distribute emergency rations, D-ration bars. The bars, designed to withstand heat, prove equally resistant to freezing. While canned C rations freeze solid, D-ration bars remain edible even at 20-degree hours. Sergeant Paul Pera, Easy Company, later recalls, "We'd chip pieces off with bayonets because the bars were frozen hard as rocks. But they didn't shatter. They didn't spoil. And they kept us fighting until Patton's army broke through on the 26th. The statistics from Bastogne are remarkable. Despite being surrounded and under siege for 8 days, the 101st Airborne maintains combat effectiveness, partly due to emergency rations that continue functioning in extreme cold. German intelligence assessment captured German documents from 1944 reveal Wehrmacht interest in D-ration technology. A report from Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, German Armed Forces High Command, dated August 1944, analyzes captured American rations. Enemy possesses emergency chocolate ration of unusual composition, survives temperature extremes that destroyed German emergency preparations, recommend immediate research into manufacturing similar product. German attempts to replicate the formula fail. Their version, tested in late 1944, either melts at high temperatures or becomes inedibly hard, the same problems American researchers encountered before Hinkle's breakthrough. A German quartermaster report notes, American emergency rations demonstrate superior shelf stability and temperature resistance. This provides tactical advantage in extreme climate operations. The numbers production statistics tell the story of the D-ration's impact. Total produced 1940-1945. Over 3 billion bars peak production. 1944. 24 million bars per week. Total weight distributed. 380 million pounds. Soldiers served. Approximately 16 million American service members received D-rations. Estimated lives saved. Military. Historians calculate D-rations directly contributed to survival in 50,000 to 100,000 emergency situations. The bars appear in every theater of war: North African desert heat, Italian mountain cold, Pacific Island humidity, Arctic convoy conditions. In every environment, they function as designed. By war's end, the D-ration becomes the most widely distributed emergency food in military history. If this story has shocked you, wait until you see our documentary on the soldier who invented duct tape in a foxhole. But I need you to do something first. Hit that like button. It helps YouTube show this video to more history enthusiasts. We put weeks of research into each episode. Your like takes 2 seconds and means everything. Now, let's see what happened to Sam Hinkle after the war. April 19th, 1984. Samuel F. Hinkle dies at age 83. His New York Times obituary is 3 paragraphs. It mentions he was president of Hershey Chocolate Corporation from 1956 to 1965 and developer of World War II Rations. It doesn't mention the D-ration bars. It doesn't mention that his formula saved thousands of lives. It doesn't mention that he solved a problem every expert called impossible. Hinkle never sought publicity for his war work. In the 1960s and 70s, when veterans began writing memoirs mentioning D-ration bars, reporters occasionally contacted Hinkle for interviews. He declined every time. One reporter preserved Hinkle's response in notes. "I solved an engineering problem. Captain Logan defined the requirements. The Army distributed the product. The credit belongs to the soldiers who survived because they had food when they needed it. That's enough." In 1962, Hinkle retires from Hershey after 38 years. He's asked what he's most proud of in his career. His answer: chocolate syrup. It made millions of children happy. When pressed about military rations, he adds, "The D-ration bars were necessary. They worked, but I'm a candy maker. I prefer making food people enjoy." The production legacy. Between 1940 and 1945, Hershey produces 3 billion D-ration bars, Field Ration D, 380 million tropical bars, heat-resistant variant for Pacific Theater, countless millions of chocolate bars for K-ration packs. Hershey receives 5 Army-Navy E awards for excellence in wartime production. The awards gather dust in storage rooms. Hinkle never displays them. The D-ration program employs over 1,000 Hershey workers at its peak. The economic impact transforms Hershey, Pennsylvania, from a small company town into a major industrial center. Modern relevance. The D-ration bar is officially discontinued in 1945, replaced by updated formulations. But Hinkle's core innovation, creating chocolate that resists melting through altered composition, becomes the foundation for all modern military chocolate. Today's MRE, meal ready to eat, includes chocolate components designed using principles Hinkle established. High cocoa content, reduced sugar, altered fat composition, added stabilizers. Commercial applications follow. Energy bars, power bars, Cliff bars, military-grade emergency rations all descend from Hinkle's work. The modern energy bar industry, worth $1.4 billion annually, exists because one engineer figured out how to make deliberately unpleasant but functionally superior food. Space program rations use similar principles. So do disaster relief supplies, emergency preparedness kits, and humanitarian aid packages. The formula that experts called illegal and impossible in 1937 becomes the template for survival food worldwide. The moral lesson. Sam Hinkle's story teaches an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most pleasing one. Hinkle could have created chocolate that tasted better, but melted at 95 degrees. He could have prioritized palatability over performance. Thousands of soldiers would have died with useless liquid chocolate in their pockets. Instead, he created something deliberately unpleasant but functionally perfect. The D-ration bar tasted terrible. Soldiers complained about it constantly, But those same soldiers lived to complain because Hinkle prioritized survival over satisfaction. When Louis Zamperini finally reached safety after 47 days at sea, reporters asked what he wanted most. His answer, real food, not those awful D-ration bars. Then he paused and added, but I'm alive to want real food because I had those bars, so I guess they weren't so awful after all. That contradiction between gratitude and complaint defines the D-ration's legacy. Nobody ever loved Sam Hinkle's creation, but thousands of people owed their lives to it, and sometimes that's enough.